Americans of Reddit, what do you not understand about Europe? I was in Ireland and all the food places were closed by 9 p.m. That's when I get hungry. And if you go to Spain, you'll probably have trouble finding restaurants that are open before 9 p.m. Monsieur. European countries are often very different. When comparing times with Spain, remember they're almost 2 time zones off of where they should be. So while it says 9 p.m., based on the sun it's more like 7:30, which, in some hotel bathrooms I've been in, the shower didn't have a door or curtain or had a half door. And water would get everywhere despite my best efforts. Why? One of 2 reasons. 1, it's built as a wet room so it's not needed. 2, it's been stolen or damaged and then just not replaced. I feel like your life has to be way past rock bottom to steal shower curtains. What is going on with all the Turkish barber shops I saw in Ireland? Is there something special about them? They call you bossman, and that's a sign of utmost respect. That's a step above the guy in the kebab shop calling you big man. Am I allowed to comment if I'm Canadian? How do so many people fit into London? And there's so many old buildings still in use. Isn't asbestos a problem? How are there so many different accents in small countries like the UK and Ireland? Pretty much in Canada most people sound the same. There's a few other accents but there aren't too many big differences. Except for maybe Newfoundlanders, Francophones and people in the country. A lot of the buildings were built before asbestos ever came into use. And when it comes to buildings that do have asbestos, it's harmless if left undisturbed. Radon on the other hand. How most of you Europeans seem fluent in English but I can't speak a lick of any other language. Even after taking 3 years of Spanish. In my case, it's the fact I watched TV in English with subtitles, not dubbed. I also started learning English when I was 5. But were it not for TV, I don't think I'd be this fluent. I totally get this. I'm American, but learned an obscure Middle Eastern language during my time in the military. My brain dumped the language within the first couple years of leaving the military because there wasn't anything I could do with it. I would have kept up with it if there was something I could do with it. It was frustrating walking through the language lab for mandatory study time and seeing Arab linguists watching dubs of Star Wars, Russian linguists watching some kind of anime, and all I had was audio clips of news. And now, 20 years later, I'm considering Korean just because of all the stuff Netflix is recommending to me. I don't know if there's just a ton of sci-fi coming out of Korea or if Netflix thinks I'm Korean. How can Europeans tell what nationality people are from based on appearance alone? In books and stuff, European people are always like, oh, the Italian man over there. I can't even notice but have always been curious. Clothes, mannerisms, sometimes complexion, etc. It's more of an art than science. And often people are wrong. But most European countries have very distinct cultural identities, with which come some stereotypes that sometimes hold true. Also, simply practice. I live near the German border and obviously see vastly more Germans than Americans do. So you just know after some time who is who. This. As a Dutch person living in Germany, I'm at least 95% of the time right in recognizing if someone is Dutch or German. Even on pictures, clothes, general appearance, hair, etc. How popular smoking cigarettes is, even with the recent boom in vaping and e-cigs in the US. I would still say that they're not even close. Every outdoor cafe in Europe has at least half of their patrons smoking. My buddy that lives over there says it's just part of their social culture. Doesn't really bother me either. It's just interesting to me that it's so looked down upon here in the US and so popular in most parts of Europe. I moved to the Netherlands about 2 months ago and I noticed the same about smoking, as well as drinking. Drinking and smoking is so much more prevalent and popular here. If you should have seen the country a decade ago. Now, when you're outside maybe a handful of people smokes. Back then, everyone smoked. It was the same as having a drink. At parties, we used to have glasses with cigarettes. City streets were covered in used ones. It's much better today. In a group, only a few are smoking. Streets are much cleaner. Pretty much every public place is non-smoking, and the ones that aren't have a designated zone. And yeah, drinking is just fun. We drink beer and wine like it's soda lol. Edit. I wrote down a mix between Dutch and English for the word cigarette lol. Is there actually nude beaches? Like we have them here, but not as much as I hear they have over in Europe. Went on a school trip canoeing around a nice river in France. The teachers didn't realize there was a nude beach. It is not the glorious, beautiful lady haven that you would imagine. Just lots of old men. Needless to say, telling a bunch of 12-year-olds not to look has the exact opposite reaction. There was a beach quite near to the dock with a sign, "Nudists here," on the rocks, but it was no delight. For each tin we did sight, we saw 12 shriveled, old flaccid cocks. Paying to use the bathroom, monsieur. Why don't y'all just let bathrooms be free so you don't have to either pay or piss in the streets? Paris smells like piss because of this. You would think they would learn. Los Angeles has a similar smell for similar reasons. Like zero public restrooms, and every store, business either doesn't have one or it's customers only. I hate visiting downtown LA so much. Fuck. I just moved to Spain and I cannot understand how normal it is to just stare so blatantly at people. Does anybody know? The constant touching and cheek kisses are also pretty weird to me because I don't like to be touched, but I was aware of those at least before I moved. Touching and kissing is very country dependent, but the staring? Are you sure they're not just staring at you specifically? Op neglected to mention that he has a big orange head. This beans for breakfast thing, I think it's mainly a British thing. What kind of beans? Are they like American baked beans? What do they taste like? Beans are included as part of a full English breakfast. This is mostly served in cafes and hotels, etc. The full English will have bacon, sausage, fried eggs, black pudding, cooked tomatoes, fried bread, and beans. A lot of people can't be bothered spending the time to cook all this for breakfast every day. I'd have beans on toast if I was gonna have beans for breakfast. Edit. Some also have hash browns too. I'm Irish and I love bean. Ran out of cereal for breakfast. Have bean. Can't be bothered to cook lunch. Bean. Looking for a filing. Late night snack. Bean. Why is it called the loo? Also, I'm Canadian. I think it's a permutation of the French word l'eau, for water, like water closet. From Edinburgh Scots garde-loo, from a corruption of French gardes l'eau. Garde-loo used by people in medieval Scotland to warn passers-by of waste about to be thrown from a window into the street below. The term was still in use as late as the 1930s and 1940s, when many people had no indoor toilets. Quotations wiki possible derivation. Why the Queen of England owns every swan in the country. History and tradition. It goes back to before the 13th century when eating swan was a royal privilege, and if you wanted to dine on swan you had to be tight with the king and be like me and the king are tight. Have some swan. Quote, they don't eat them now, it's just about protecting the monsieur. The Queen also owns all the sturgeons, whales, and dolphins in the waters around the UK for similar historical reasons. That's the biggest flex ever, lack of air conditioning. In Britain it's usually proper cold, so what's the point getting one if you're only gonna use it for a month? What does the word bloody mean for them? Is it like a swear? You're bloody right it is. I think most people here think Europe equals England. Or do we just think England is the weirdest? No ice in soft drinks. Edit. Totally forgot there were no free refills. As long as the drinks are cold, this seems best. No dilution and more carbonation. Right. Ever since I went to Europe about 20 years ago, I've been ordering my soft drinks ice-free. Much better flavor when it isn't watered down, and it absolutely comes out of the machine ice cold. in almost every instance I've came across in my 20 years. Never going back. ITT, what do you not understand about England? The least Europe part of Europe. Why there are so many pickpockets, organized crime and human trafficking. Basically, tourists tend to have lots of cash on them to afford coming to Paris. So if you're good at it, you earn more than a monthly wage in one day. Of course that's a good deal for organized crime, so because the subway is hard to supervise and the main transport system for people, it's doubly worth it. Add to that the fact organized crime employs children for this, as they can't be prosecuted, and you get why it's a popular criminal activity. I think y'all figured out game shows, and AMP, #X200B. Stop giving out prizes. Just have comedians as contestants and let them joke around and not give a shit about the game. And AMP, #X200B. Edit. As an example, here are clips from Would I Lie to You and AMP, #X200B. Here's Carrot in a Box. From 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown. Part 1 and 2. Those aren't game shows, they're panel shows. Exact, they may have some arbitrary points system, but they're really just structured comedy. Don't get me wrong, I love them, monsieur, but they're not the British version of game shows, they're their own thing entirely.